Here's Shed. Off the window, no. Roberts tried to get it. Shed for the win. Got it. Jamal Shed plays the hero again.
Back to pass. Donovan Smith. Smith steps up in the pocket, unloads it, throws it all the way downfield into the end zone. Tipped, and it is caught. Caught by the Cougars. Caught for a touchdown. Unbelievable. Caught by Stephon Johnson.
Stick it in your pipe and smoke it, baby. Yes!
Welcome to the Scott and Holm podcast, back here the day after Houston Snowpocalypse 2025. We've all made it here. I am, as somebody who escaped right before the onset of said weather, very happy that Dustin, quick change up here, not Bobby this week. Bobby is out at the PGA Show in Florida. Dustin is co-hosting here, taking his emeritus title. We're putting him to work here for us, but glad to see you have the lights on where you are, and just in all seriousness, I've been very glad to hear that it's been the kind of weather it's been the snow day kind of weather day versus 4 years ago, which was decidedly less fun. And I could say, as somebody whose parents and have many dear friends live in Texas, very scary time, and much worse for those of y'all who lived it. So how have you dealt with the snow? How are you doing, bud? Just generally, even I'm asking you that like I didn't see you 72 hours ago.
No, I'm doing great. The whole snow thing is, like you said, it's had a very snow day feel to it. We're just kind of took the day on Tuesday, kind of slept in today, and then went into work for a half day today. Seems like that's kind of how everyone's handling it. Power grid seems to be doing good everywhere, as far as I can tell. Certainly, we never lost power here. So feeling very fortunate to have made it to the other end of that, kind of, because like you said, 2021, man, and again, lots of people died, so I don't want to be like I had the hardest time of anybody. Lots of people had it much worse than me, obviously.
Secondary confirmation, you had a pretty rough time.
But I had a pretty miserable time in the last 4 years around, 4 years ago. So for this one to just be, nice, take a day and a half off of work and kind of chill at home with the fiance, beautiful. Can't ask for much better than that. And glad to finally have an adverse weather event that was not enough to knock out the power grid here in the Houston area.
We love to see it. So Dustin, I think I'm going to kick this off here with our main topic, the topic that's going to, I think, take up the majority of what we're going to talk about tonight. Houston Cougar men's basketball, who have played three games since we last, Bobby and I sat in front of microphones and talked to each other about Houston Cougar sports. You could describe it as the absolute, I'm not saying this in any order here, heart and mouth, the most stress one of the most stressful games of the season, certainly the most stressful one that ended in a Cougar win this season in UCF on Saturday. Maybe at times a little bit stressful, at times West Virginia is a basket or two away from really starting to make me sweat, but ultimately not really that close in the end game last Wednesday. And then as I finished about 15 minutes ago, a absolute evisceration by the Cougs of Utah, a one-day delayed game at the Fertitta Center. So I think on the whole, pretty outstanding week. You're never going to complain about a 3-0 week, even if all three were games that to varying degrees you were favored to win and that you hoped in the look ahead of this week that you would win, but never taking that for granted. And I'm feeling pretty good. Like there are things to talk about these three games where you could say, I think this could be better, but I don't think we're really quibbling about the last week that was.
Yeah, I mean, on the whole, like kind of like you said, in each individual game, Houston was going to be the favorite by a decent margin. But you're playing three teams, West Virginia, UCF, Utah, that I think have done enough, each in their own right, to be like, you can't 100% write that off and be like, they're not going to give you a game. And certainly UCF was the one of those three teams that did end up doing exactly that. West Virginia, kind of like you said, made it a little interesting for a little bit into the second half there. So to finish that 3-0, get to 7-0 in the Big 12, heading to Lawrence on Saturday. Got to be happy with it. Game ahead of the rest of the conference. So good position to be in, and kind of feel like this team is continuing to play better and better as the season goes on, which always seems to be the hallmark of Kelvin Sampson teams.
So for the games that we're going to go from least to most recent, starting with the 70-54 win a week ago against West Virginia Mountaineers at the Fertitta Center. Dustin, since you're already kind of going here, pass it to you here. Where would you like to start from the West Virginia game? What were your biggest takeaways from that one?
Man, you talk about, I mean, it ended up being a 16-point win. So, yeah, down the stretch, it was definitely one that the Cougars kind of had there. But, man, that second half opened. I don't remember the last time I saw that streaky of a stretch of play in a Houston Cougar game, back and forth. Houston was up. It was kind of back and forth early. Houston pulls out to a 13-point lead at halftime. You're up 13 at home. Usually for Houston, that means you're kind of salting this one away. Not the case in this one. Mountaineers start with the second half's first 8 points, cut it from 13 down to 5. Houston answers with a 9-1 run, right back to 13. Only for West Virginia to respond to that with a 12-2 run of their own to pull within 3. Only for Houston to then hold the Mountaineers without a point for over 6.5 minutes, part of a slow motion 16-1 run for the Cougars that put the game away. So for just to go run for each of the two teams back to back like that in the second half was kind of a wild series of events, kind of a wild emotional game at the Fertitta Center. But glad to see the Cougars pull away. And man, you got to start, I think, with Juwan Roberts just being unguardable in this one. Every time he got the ball down low, it just was an automatic bucket. Ends up 10 of 13 from the field for 22 points in this one. That, and man, just the defense on Javon Small, who we know was going to be he's someone that's at the top of your scouting report if you're trying to defend West Virginia. Very, very talented scorer who's been doing some crazy things this year. And it sure looked like he was about to have a big game in this one. Had 3 3-pointers in the first 6 minutes of the game. The entire rest of the way had just 4 total points on 1 of 7 shooting after those first 6 minutes. So the Cougs, he let him get up to a little bit of an early start. Part of that, West Virginia getting out to I think it was like a 15-12 lead, but defense really put the clamps on him the rest of the way. And that's one of the many things that we've been spoiled for in the Kelvin Sampson era. It's not like we've never seen an opposing player sustain a hot start like that over the course of the game, but it's remarkable how often you see something like that. This guy's been great all year. Just been terrorizing teams, comes out and is just shooting the lights out. And then all of a sudden the Cougars just put lockdown on him. And the rest of the way is really basically a non-factor. So I think as much as anything, as much as the runs were going back and forth, I think for West Virginia to really sustain any of those and stay in the game, they needed Javon Small to keep scoring. And the fact that Houston really shut him down the stretch was, I think, a big key to victory in this one.
And we almost take it as a given here that the Cougs are going to hold an opponent's best player under his season averages. And like you said, it's not that Javon Small had 0 impact in this game, had that strong start offensively you alluded to. Finished the game also with 8 assists, only 1 turnover. I don't think you could look at that guy and say, oh, well, he did nothing to help his team offensively. But you said it. He didn't affect the game in a positive way for West Virginia during really anything after the first handful of minutes of the game, and certainly not during that brief window where the Mountaineers went on that 12-2 run starting around the first media timeout in the second half. Most of that was really Amani Hansberry, the West Virginia bench big guy who certainly has my respect after the conclusion of this basketball game. But Javon Small wasn't able to be a part of West Virginia's effort to really put pressure in the Cougs. And immediately after that run, you mentioned also UH had its own kill shot run. And then after that point, we never really had any doubt who was going to win this basketball game. One of the larger points that Bobby and I think have made repeatedly in this show, and it's something we've seen with the evolution of this current year's team, is that the Cougs have been doing a better job not letting this year's opponents get to the free throw line. And through today, I looked it up. Javon Small has made 7+ trips to the free throw line in 3 of his past 4 games played. The one he did was against us. Like, I know it's a 4-game, sample size there, but like just a year ago playing for Oklahoma State, Small kept that game. Not that it was ever really that close. That was one where Kelvin Sampson ran on the court screaming at dumbass ref Tony Padilla. But Small kept that one from being a laugher because he went to the free throw line at time, because he's an individual player who is good at getting to the foul line. He's been that pretty consistently over his college career, certainly in the last couple seasons. You forced Javon Small to try to beat you with his shot making, and that was one of the biggest reasons why West Virginia never really threatened to win this game beyond that little brief stretch in the second half. And Jalen Roberts' performance is rightly going to get a ton of attention because he was fantastic. Looked every bit like the go-to big guy that we expect him to be coming into the season. Also want to shout out LJ Cryer. I think this is one of his most clutch games of the season. It felt like anytime West Virginia would have one of their larger, small runs, it cut the UH lead to something more manageable or do something positively, that LJ Cryer would be answering with a 3-pointer sometime shortly afterwards. I also wanted to, I just had this one play written down. I thought one big momentum swinging play was that Javier Francis rebound put back off a Uzan missed runner, which was right after West Virginia had cut the lead to 51-48. It was Javier's only made field goal of the game, but came at a big point. But back to Roberts, I don't think you could say enough good stuff about the game he had. It was a clinic in post play. There wasn't a single guy in West Virginia who came close to checking him. I say this in the most complimentary way possible, and probably not for the first time on this podcast when it comes to Jalen Roberts. It's like watching a rec league basketball game where one guy's, you know where I'm going with this. You're smiling because you know where I'm going with this. One guy is a little bit older than the rest of the players, but just keeps absolutely schooling everybody, has his various old man post moves around 10, 12 feet inside the basket. Dustin, you're an erstwhile rec basketball player. Is that at least a semi-accurate comparison?
That is a very accurate comparison.
And again, saying all that in the most complimentary way possible. I mean, this is not me calling Jalen Roberts old. It's just part of his larger development. And really in the season, more micro, your big men are all starting to look healthy and they're all starting to play their best basketball. And that certainly wasn't the case at the start of this season. And that makes this really good basketball team an even taller order for anyone that's trying to beat them this year.
Yeah. One of the other things that stood out for me from this game was, and I know you're gonna have something to say about this because we both posted on Blue Sky about this from our respective accounts. This, as going to this one game, attending this one in person, it felt like both teams, just everything they threw up from three was going in. Like, it just felt like it was nothing but these teams both raining threes back and forth all game, which it kind of was. Like, both teams took over half of their shots from beyond the arc. Both teams made over 40% of those threes. And you're thinking, okay, you look up and you expect the final score to be, 81-70 or something. And no, it was 70-54. And you're like, wait a second. That's like a low scoring game. These teams were just like unconscious from three. What was happening? And it's the fact that it was a pretty good offensive game. It was just an extremely low possession game. 54 offensive possessions in this game for each team. The fewest in a U of H game since Kelvin Sampson's first season. And Kelvin Sampson's had some low possession games in the meantime. That's kind of Houston's thing. So for this to be an insanely low possession game, even by Houston standards, I thought was pretty wild. And prior to this game, all three times that Houston had surrendered at least a point per possession in a game this year, they had lost. Gave up 54 and 54 possessions to West Virginia. Spoiler alert, did it again in the next game and won that one as well. So, it was good to see that, as much as we enjoyed the one that just ended, where it was an insane Houston defensive performance, even when you have a team that's kind of feisty, that's making some, at times, circus shots like West Virginia and UCF both did against U of H. This is a U of H team that's good enough to still end up with a 16-point win at the end of all that. So, I think the fact that West Virginia was making as many frustrating shots as they were, like I said, speaks to what a feisty team that is. They won at Kansas to open Big 12 play. They would go on, and after this game, they would beat Iowa State and Morgantown right after that, given the Cyclones their only loss of Big 12 play so far this year. And they were doing all that without leading scorer Star Tucker DeVries, who's out long-term. I think that speaks really, really well of this team, speaks really, really well of first-year head coach Darian DeVries, and speaks to it being a good win for Houston to end up winning this one by 16 points.
Yeah, wanted to double down. If you didn't bring it up, I was going to make sure we did it before we got done with this game. All the positive things I said about West Virginia in the preview. Tough basketball team that is so insanely ahead of schedule under their first-year head coach, an entirely new roster, and, like you said, missing their best player by a decent margin. Even though Javon Small's quite good due to injury. If this West Virginia team finishes in the top half of the Big 12 standings, is comfortably on the right side of the bubble come end of the regular season, no contest. Darian DeVries is your coach of the year. Yep. All respect to TJ Otzelberger, all respect to Kelvin Sampson. Nobody in this league right now is overachieving their preseason expectations more than DeVries. And frankly, I'll be very, very happy if U of H can take the rematch in Morgantown in a week's time or week plus time by any margin. Like that's a good, tough basketball team.
Absolutely.
And the Cougars traveled to Orlando for the early time slot game against the UCF Knights on Saturday. I believe I used this description of it in the intro, a true heart and mouth win by the Cougs at UCF. Everything about this game screamed ranked team loses on the road. And yet, of course, if you're listening, you know that despite a lot of things not going U of H's way and one of the more crazy, stressful endings you will ever see, that the Cougs found a way to get the win, and for the first time this season, U of H found a way to win a close game. Really found a way to win a close game, period, but found a way to win a close game that occurred away from the Fertitta Center. Because coming to Saturday, you were 0-3 in all of those previous such games this season. The Auburn game at the Toyota Center and the 2 games that you lost, Bama and San Diego State, at the Players Era event in Vegas. I think you were unlucky to have lost all 3 of those games, but I mean, luck or not, you are what your record is. And not to say U of H's entire season hinged on winning at UCF. Thankfully, the Knights are good enough that they no longer constitute a bad loss. But the longer U of H would have gone this season without winning this kind of game, the more legitimacy you're lending to that critique of U of H, that critique of U of H's resume. So hopefully this won't be our best road win of the season, but I'd like to think this is a win that allowed this U of H team to believe in a concrete way that, hey, we can win these kind of games. It's a kind of a good and bad combo. I don't love that your starting 3 guards combined to go 10 of 35 from the field, and then after 90 seconds of game action, JoJo Tugler had to go to the bench for the rest of the first half because of foul trouble. But you take all those things into account and you're like, wow, all that happened and U of H won this fucking basketball game. Like, that's pretty remarkable, isn't it?
It really is. And to just like, in case, I mean, most of you listening probably watched it, but I mean, just kind of like a recap the final 15 seconds of that game, because they were absolutely insane. 15 seconds to go. Houston up 1. Terrence Arsenault misses the front end of a 1-and-1. UCF's Keyshawn Hall makes a layup on the other end, giving the Knights a 1-point lead with 9 seconds remaining. Houston takes entirely too long to figure out what they're doing. Like, look like maybe they're going to run right up and try to do something without taking a timeout, then end up taking a timeout in the front court with 3 seconds left, having killed off like 6 seconds to just get across half court, looking really disjointed. Then the Cougs then pass the ball directly into Juwan Roberts, who puts it up and in with a second to go. UCF full court inbounds pass hits the hanging scoreboard for a turnover. Oh, good. Houston gets to pass the ball with 1 second left. Surely the game is over. Not so fast. Juwan Roberts called for an illegal screen after he got, by a UCF player, shoved into another UCF player, giving the ball back to the Knights with the second left. And then JoJo Tugler tips UCF's inbounds pass, allowing that pesky 1.1 second to finally tick away and get Houston out of there with that 1 point win. But kind of like you said, this is a game where nothing went right for Houston. They got into Orlando late the night before having an early morning tip. They looked less in sync defensively during the first half than I think we've maybe seen all year. But like you said, all their guard shooters went cold. Houston shot just 3 of 16 from 3 as a team. That was their fewest number of threes made in a game this year. Not only that, in the first half, every player that wasn't Javier Francis seemed like they were missing little bunnies within 5 feet as well. And then, I think we have to talk about the way this game was officiated. You talked about JoJo Tugler missing almost the entire first half after picking up a first foul on a possession where he had just clearly gotten fouled a couple seconds prior to the foul that he did genuinely commit. But, you call the first one, the second one doesn't happen. And then his second is a completely unnecessary double technical that came after an extremely minor scuffle that was pretty clearly instigated by Keyshawn Hall of UCF. And then you keep going. His third came in the second half on just absolutely the cleanest block I have seen all year. That was
worst call all game. Even the Roberts one, worst call than that one.
I don't know. The worst call of the game, I think, was Tiam just absolutely assaulting Emmanuel Sharp on that drive to no call. There's so many candidates. That was such a clean block.
That was the only line made me angriest. Sorry.
At least, like, I get it. I get it in that situation, because when a guy's going up for a block, sometimes you just anticipate it as a referee. So I almost understand that one. Whereas, like, Tiam just cleaning Sharp's clock as he's driving with the ball. Like, I don't know whether you're anticipating that one or not, you blow the whistle. Mind blowing. You saw Kelvin Sampson getting heated in the first half over the double standard in terms of how the teams were officiated in terms of what is or isn't contact going for a rebound. Tiam played 34 minutes. Great player. Loved Mustafa Tiam. Love him as a player. Very exciting young player. Should be still a senior in high school. 7'2", extremely talented. Did a lot of really good things. Really good player. Really like him. 0 fouls for that player in 34 minutes is fucking malpractice by this officiating crew. He was bodying dudes all over the place. Body dudes that were driving. Body dudes that were shooting. Body dudes going for rebounds. He should have been in foul trouble, if not outright fouled out, and he had 0 fouls. Utterly inexplicable. I mean, there have been games this year that I don't think were called very well. There's the Alabama game that I will still get on my soapbox and say, if Alabama doesn't get that absolute non-existent blocking call on Emmanuel Sharp in the closing seconds, that's a turnover. Houston wins that one in regulation. I have not had a game, and I don't know how long, where I go, not only was that officiated poorly, that felt like that was officiated poorly on one side exclusively. Like you heard the UCF alum announcer just constantly all game. I don't know, man. That looked like a foul on UCF wasn't called. I don't know, man. That looked like a foul on UCF wasn't called. Wow, I think UCF got away with that one. Like it was wild. Last time I was on this podcast, Sam, I shocked you giving kudos to an officiating crew. And I have to turn around and say, I hope that Kip Kissinger, Justin Shamian, and Randall Anders never call another U of H
Fran
game.
Fischel's close friend Kip Kissinger.
Almost
Final Four crew.
Almost impossible to overstate how bad that was. So to slowly get back.
The only game that was worse than that was Bama. In my opinion, the only game that was definitively worse than that was Bama, because at least this crew didn't call almost 50 fouls. That's the only thing nice I'll say. But it was everything you said. I agree. Horribly inconsistent. Just like there were times like, oh, they're playing. And there are times where, yeah, like the color guy is just like, wow, they called that, huh?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'll say about the Alabama game, there may have been more bad calls in the Alabama game, but I felt like they were more evenly distributed in the Alabama game than they were in this one.
It's just either way, watch because of the volume. Sorry.
It's true. It's true. There's really no wrong answer if you want to pick a worst officiated U of H game this year between those two. But to wrap up, U of H overcame, again, let's not pretend like everything that went wrong this way was all everyone that wrong. Everything that went wrong for them in this game was all the officials. They self-inflicted plenty of wounds here. Overcame all that, overcame the clown show from the Zebras, got the win on the road. Just an unbelievably gutsy effort from the Cougars.
And you can't say enough positive about the game that Javier Francis had.
Yep.
One of those performances that I'll be thinking about after this season is done. The way this first half was going, how poorly the Cougars are playing, and how well UCF was playing in front of that ravenous home crowd. They never shot it amazing, but they made some very tough shots in this game. It felt like this could have been a 20-something point deficit at halftime, how poorly a lot of U of H was playing. And the fact that Francis, the fact that Francis played as well as he did allowed it to even be within striking distance, allowed you to have that pretty quick run out of the gates in the second half and to immediately blink and be like, oh, this is a one basket game again. The U of H is right back in it. The U of H erased that first half deficit so quickly. You're only in that spot because of how well Javier played. And it wasn't just the shot making and the incredible offensive rebounding, but he gave you those two things in spades. You absolutely had to have Javier give you a ton of minutes because of the aforementioned foul trouble that JoJo Tugler was dealing with, which meant your alternative is that Javier goes out there and struggles for whatever reason, whether he's in foul trouble or just isn't playing well. You're going to have to, your alternative is play Terrence Arsenault as a small ball 4, and then you have him and Roberts going against Mustafa Tiam. All respect to Terrence, I don't think that would have gone well for the Cougars. I think it would have exacerbated the problems that we saw in real time. Or you're, putting Tugler back out there 2 fouls, or I don't know, go to Sedlot off the bench. None of those are good alternatives, and thankfully alternatives we didn't have to consider because Javier was so good. The minutes he gave you were already some of the very best, most impactful minutes that any player has given U of H all season, that he was doing in a way that allowed you to rest JoJo Tugler, not put him out there with 2 fouls and risk having him going to the locker room at halftime with 3-4 fouls, allow JoJo to play a meaningful amount of minutes in the second half, and I think positively contribute to you getting back in this game. I think that turned a really good performance into one that I don't think I'm exaggerating in saying is on the short list for performance of the year from a Cougar player. I don't think I'm being too effusive in my praise of the game that Javier had. It was so good.
Yeah, when we do the posters at the end of the year and we do single game performance, I think this one will deserve a nomination because, like you said, Javier Francis is very much the reason Houston even had a chance to win this game. 14 of Houston's 30 points in the first half, coming off the bench to keep the Cougs competitive when it seemed like nobody else could make a shot, and only got 2 points in the second half, but continued grabbing huge boards throughout the game. Ends up with 16 and 10. Just a huge game from him. And I mean, he's someone who started the year banged up. When he got healthy, found that he had lost his starting job to JoJo Tugler. And man, it just seems like all he ever does is just show up and just bust his ass and do whatever the coaching staff wants, just makes plays, and just feels like he's getting so much better about getting putbacks and going up with them. That was one of the things, loved Javier for, past years and even the beginning of this season. Loved him, but man, he would grab these offensive rebounds right under the basket, and then you go up with it. You got 3 inches on the guy that's on you, right? Just go up with it to layup.
Or just kick it out, get it out of your hands as quickly as possible, pal.
Yeah, but even then, sometimes he's kicking out, and you go, okay, nice kick out, but also it was a layup. If you just go up with it, it's a layup, and he's gotten so much better at that. Just thinking, hey, if I grab this ball right under the basket, I should probably just go right back up with it. And just getting so much better at that. None of that. 6 of 6 from the free throw line in this one, Javier, was in a game you won by 1 point. That is huge. And that's another area where you can just tell he's put a lot of work in. So just, unbelievably proud of him. that is my, I don't know. We'll see what happens for the rest of the year, but up until now, I'm with you. I think that's my, U of H men's basketball individual single game effort of the season for me up until this point.
He just looks like so much more of a confident player offensively. Like he's still not going to be any more than your fourth or fifth option when he's out there, but it's no longer a put your hands over your eyes and hope whenever he tries to do something offensively. Like I had the up and under against K-State where I was just like, JVR didn't have that before this year. And certainly you would have been like, oh no, if he started doing that. Like he's become so much more confident. And now I think in the last month, he started to actually become healthy. Like he's actually a guy you're not afraid of trying to score the basketball, which is really cool. Jalen Roberts didn't have a strong start in this one because basically nobody not named Javier Francis, and a little bit Malik Wilson. Shout out to Malik Wilson for his first half because nobody played very well at the start, but it showed he's kind of your go-to guy. That there's a reason why you went to Roberts late in this one, why Roberts was the guy who got the ball and ultimately hit the game-winning shot. There's a reason why you went to him so often in the closing minutes of this basketball game. Like he's truly becoming the J1 Roberts we expect in the preseason. And not that we ever, after the first month or so, wrote him off. I was like, oh, well, he can't do this. But it's a little bit of a slow start to the season for him, but it was a great one. I don't know if you've seen this clip, Dustin, that they're drawing up the play for Roberts and Ryan Elvin's kind of on the second ring of the huddle. And he's like that after they get done, he's like, that's game right there. And it's so cool. And just to see him have the old man move for the bucket there. I wanted to also go back to something you said, like with the officiating in this game, I'm still proud of how this team is defending without fouling because yes, you did get some bad calls, but what was it? It was 20. It was a 20 foul call. I'm not looking at the box score, but I believe you got called for 20 total fouls the entire game against an opponent who is very, very good at getting the free throw. An opponent who, yes, I think we believe bad officiating contributed to that immensely, but there are some good teams that are good. There are some teams that are good at the dark art of drawing fouls. Like as much as we didn't like the call, that's the dark art of it is, hey, like making it look like J1 Roberts set an illegal screen instead of, hey, got some contact from a UCF guy. Like UCF is good at doing that kind of stuff. And that, I mean, I would say Darius Johnson sitting with 4 fouls for a critical point in the second half was as much as any team was affected by foul trouble. I know Sharp got to 3 a little bit quicker than you expected, but U of H wasn't sitting any guys late because they had fouled out. Like no one fouled out in this game for the Cougs. Everything about this game in terms of how the crew was calling it and how in for like JoJo early, I just started having the flashbacks of like the A&M game in the tournament last year, the Bama game early season. Like, oh God, this is going to be one where it's a triage situation in the last couple of minutes if it's close. And frankly, there were times in the first half I was like, God, I hope it's even close enough for me to be stressing about that in the closing stage, and that didn't happen. And I think that's, again, not to make this point about every single game. I promise I won't make it about the Utah game because that one was never close enough for any of that to matter. But that you went on the road against an opponent who was very good at drawing fouls and a crew that seemed very, very willing to take what U of H did and call a foul much more than the opponent. The Cougars won this game. Yeah. Like it wasn't pretty, it wasn't easy, but you won this game with so many things working against you. Can I be a little negative, even because I think we've been way more positive? Can I be a little negative for a second here?
Yeah, I want to put a bow on the one point that you made there real quick, and then I'll pass it back to you to be a little bit negative. Houston in Big 12 play only right now, 4th best in the Big 12 at not sending opponents to the free throw line. That is an incredible statistic,
and the great unfathomable.
Yeah, and it means that on the season, their opponent free throw rate in terms of free throw attempts per field goal attempt per Ken Palm, U of H literally exactly at the national average in that number. You will take that. I will take that and grab it with 2 hands anytime that is offered. If U of H is going to be right at the national average of giving up free throws, hell yeah, let's take that.
Do you know what we were last year? I'm looking at it right now.
What do you, much worse than that.
14th out of 14 in opponent free throw rate. That's. And again, last year's team, great defensive team. You did a lot of things very well, but if you can defend at the level this team's defending at, and you're like even I wouldn't even say finishing 4th. If we're like middle of the Big 12, if we're like 7th or 8th at the end of the season, I think we're repeating as conference champions. I know that's a lot to like put on one stat. I think we're repeating as conference champions.
I agree.
All right, let me be negative because I've been way more positive than negative because the performance deserves way more positivity than negativity. But outside of Francis and Roberts, considering UCF hasn't been that good this year at keeping opponents from putting the ball in the basket, I thought the performance offensively, at least from your guards, was pretty disappointing. Again, as great as those Roberts and Francis efforts were, I don't think U of H is going to win against any of the better Big 12 teams we'll see on the road this season if Miles Uzan, LJ Cryer, and Emmanuel Sharp shoot this poorly with a good number of those misses coming on pretty open looks. Like that was going to matter. That's what made me most pessimistic in real time about winning this game, is it felt like our open looks weren't falling. And guys, this is not me sounding any kind of larger alarm about it. I'm just talking about this performance, this one point in time. But if we see a repeat of this on Saturday at Kansas, we'll be just as ugly as last year's trip. And I don't think I'm saying anything groundbreaking in saying that, but I'm glad you won in spite of this poor shooting performance, but I think it's got to be noted.
Yeah, I mean, certainly U of H, their 3-point shooting this year has been one of their team strengths, but I think that that's always going to be that's going to be your team strength that is most volatile from game to game. That is, that you can't just replicate every single game by effort. And I think maybe this team, like I said on the telecast, they said had gotten into Orlando pretty late the night before. Didn't really. They looked like a team that had just gotten in and was playing an early game. So I think maybe you can accept that, A, bad shooting games happen, B, that's kind of the recipe for a bad shooting game. But no, it was very frustrating. We've seen this team so often in games that they're struggling, and all of a sudden, there's LJ open for a 3. All right. And then it keeps gets the momentum going. And then every time Houston got one of those, it clanked, and you go, oh man, that's okay. That was our chance to really kind of quiet the crowd and get things going. And just never really seems to get one of those, which is, I think, kind of underscores why at the very, very end, it was almost kind of surprising and very satisfying to see Houston eke out the victory.
Yeah, back to my first thought. It was a game that really felt like it was the worst case scenario in a lot of ways, and you still won it. You really can't beat that with a stick.
Absolutely.
And third out of 3 games this week, a game I'm struggling to say very much useful about. Not because it wasn't very satisfying, not because I didn't enjoy every second of it I watched. A 70-36 win that went final just under an hour ago. Win by the Houston Cougars over the Utah Utes. A 34-point win where I don't know if the 34-point margin really conveys what an ass-kicking it was, because Emmanuel Sharp set out this one. Hopefully precautionary. Hopefully he's back on Saturday against Kansas. Samson was very aggressive, and when he chose to rest J1 Roberts, LJ Cryer, and Miles Uzan, for good reason, the game was very, very well out of hand when those guys went out. Jojo Tugler fouled out after not playing a ton of minutes. So the last 8-9 minutes of this game were basically Malik Wilson, Terrence Arsenault, and a rotating cast of guys who haven't played very much for you this season. That's how this one went. And you still almost doubled Utah. A team coming in on a 3-game winning streak. That's crazy, man.
Yeah, it is hard to put words to the defensive performance that we just saw from Houston moments ago in that win over Utah. Utah, their low point total on the season coming into this one was 56. They missed that by 20 points. Utah was averaging 80 points a game, didn't even get halfway there to their season average in point total. Turned the ball over 26 times. That is fully 44% of Utah's offensive possessions. Out of every 9 Utah offensive possessions, 4 of them ended in a turnover. That is insane. That is, man, there's what you imagine would happen if like a bad college team played like a good high school team or something. Like it barely looked like the guys were playing the same level of basketball in this one. And like I said, a Utah team that, 3 games ago, I'd again, okay, well, that's really cool. And all those defensive numbers are fantastic and everything. But okay, Utah, probably the worst team in the Big 12. They're on a 3-game winning streak. Apparently they're better than, Oklahoma State and Utah, at least a couple of these teams. I don't know. It's hard to overstate what a good defensive performance that was. Like you, I'm finding a lack of actual words to say about it, but it's not because it wasn't that good of a defensive performance. Is because it was so good. I'm staggered and at a loss for words to describe it, honestly.
Good confidence game from Miles Uzan. I liked seeing that. Obviously, you're gonna have to do it against better opponents, but I thought he didn't have an especially good game against UCF. I think I'm one of Miles Uzan's defenders, such as it is in this fan base, but I won't spin the UCF game. I don't think he was especially good. I thought at least some of that poor last sequence that you talked about earlier could go back on him. It was good to see him come out there, look confident offensively, and directing a really strong start. Because again, the 70 points U of H scored, good total, devoid of any context, but that's 70 points where the last 10 minutes were mostly your end of the bench guys like taking the shots, mostly trying as you might to get Said Lot to get a point, which he did. Shout out Said Lot for contributing 1 point to that 70. It was 40 something. It was over 40 at the half. Like this was a better offensive effort, and I think you can't give any one guy more credit for that than Uzan. Team effort though, on the whole, 4 of your 5 starters were in double figures. The only one that wasn't Jojo Tugler played a pretty minimal minutes in this one because of the various foul trouble he was in, but not foul trouble that had any impact on this game. And such that Utah has been good at anything this year. They've actually had their moments as a team. Offensively scored 80 plus in a win over Oklahoma State. I mean, this is not to knock this team's effort because, I mean, they beat him pretty convincingly, but like it wasn't an especially close game, but much closer when they played in Ames. They lost by 23, which again is not a knock on the Cyclones here, but this isn't an especially great opponent. This isn't an opponent as bad as you made them look. And again, you were dealing with a lot. I mean, I'm glad that this wasn't a situation like 4 years ago, but it was dealing with some weirdness. I wonder if they practiced yesterday with the snow going on and what have you. Like the game was at a weird time, all that stuff, and never in doubt. Like it was 20-5. Like I watched all this games. I went back at halftime, but I got off work because I'm 2 hours behind you and wasn't able to get home before tip off. It was 20-5 as I put the ESPN app on my TV. It was just like, I think we'll be fine. I don't know if we'll keep the quadrupling them up pace, but I think we're going to find a way to win this basketball game.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned it though. Like the funny thing is I just was marveling at all those, didn't even get to half their total, 20 points minus the previous game. They did that by getting really hot at the end of the game offensively, relatively speaking. Like they scored, I think, fully a third of their points in the last 6 minutes of this game. I mean, they, against U of H's, substitutes and backups right at the end, finally started scoring a bunch of points relatively that got them to 36. I mean, wow, that was awfully good. You mentioned Milos Uzan having a game. How about Terrence Arsenault stepping in for Manuel Sharp in this one? 10 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 4 blocks, 3 steals. Man, dude was just absolutely stuffing the stat sheet, doing everything you could possibly want. Malik Wilson as well had 5 steals off the bench. Kind of an off night shooting for him, was one of the only people who had an off night shooting. But you're talking earlier about Javier Francis really polishing off his offensive game and getting a lot more impressive in that area. I mean, I think the same goes for Terrence Arsenault and Malik Wilson, guards off the bench as well, guys who have really, I think, not only over the course of their careers, but even just over the course of the season, we've seen them get a lot more comfortable, get a lot more impactful on offense. Kelvin Sampson's teams always seem like they have at least 1 or 2 guys in the rotation where you just go, okay, that guy's basically just there for defense, for rebounding, which is fine. Like that's worked well for Kelvin Sampson. That's the team identity. So you don't mind having guys that's kind of their thing. Houston's 8-man rotation they want to go with at this point. Like if I told you any one of those players was going to score double figures in a given game, you'd be like, yeah, that seems legit. That could happen. Like there's not a player that they run out there that you can just kind of write off on the offensive end at this point, which is remarkable because it's not like they're giving up anything on the defensive end to get there. So, I posted this during the game, but I genuinely think with as good as Terrence Arsenault and Malik Wilson have been off the bench, I think this might be the best guard group that Kelvin Sampson has had. The 2019-20 team deserves, and I've seen Kelvin Sampson himself kind of, when people go, oh, is this your best guard group? He goes, well, hold on, let's not forget that the 2019-20 group, which ended up not getting to play in the NCAA tournament because of COVID and everything. But that team, their 5 guards were Quentin Grimes, Deke Giroux, Nate Hinton, Marcus Sasser, Caleb Mills. That's a pretty salty 5-guard group that you got to compete with for best guard group. But and I mean, hey, and I'll even say I love Milos Uzan. I think he's having a good season, really coming on strong. If you give me truths here, I'm gonna go, hey, would you rather have one more year of Jamal Shead running the point or Uzan. You know, I take Jamal Shead. So, you know, again, with no criticism to Uzan at all, but to say that maybe Houston took a half a step back this year in terms of the quality of your starting point guard. It's still a better guard group because both of your guards coming off the bench right now are better than any of the guards you had coming off of the bench for you last year because Arsenault and Malik Wilson have improved their games so much. So just to be able to run the 5 guards out that Houston is right now, with all 5 of them, I think, really playing at a high level, in addition to, like you said, all 3 of your forwards really playing at a much higher, healthier level than they were early on this season, I think really speaks to what a deep and dangerous Houston team this is right now.
Yeah, this game is Terrence Arsenault best. He can impact the game in so many different ways, and it's good to. I'd prefer that we don't find out how the Kansas game would go without Emmanuel Sharp playing, that he'd be healthy and back for that one. But it is good to know that you can miss someone as important as Emmanuel Sharp from this game and still eviscerate a team that I don't even think is one of the worst in this conference, like the Cougars did today against the Utes. I know I made fun of Sedlot earlier, like the 1 for 4 from the free throw line and all that, but I love seeing him just throw his body with reckless abandon for offensive boards. Like, that was really fun. Was it during meaningful game action? Not especially, but that actually made me like engaged with the game, and picked up 2 quick fouls and then did a good job not forcing you to go back to JV or J1. So you have a big man on the floor. That he didn't commit any fouls after that. It was able to do what you needed him to do, which is to eat some minutes here and get your big men as fresh as possible.
Yeah, I remember Kelvin Sampson saying something a while back when Sedlot was having to play some minutes last year. Kelvin Sampson said, we recruited this guy so that he would be able to help us in year 3. And we're having to throw him out here for minutes in year 1 right now. And I think that is exactly what I see with Sedlot right now. Do I want him playing significant minutes against top opponents right now? No. Do I think he'll be a pretty salty player and ready to be part of the forward rotation next year in year 3 in the program? I really do. And I think you can see the steps that he's made in the development that he's making in this program right now.
Not to say he'll be J1 Roberts. I don't want to put that like that's going to be big shoes to fill for a lot of Cougar big men in years to come. But just remember, redshirt freshman J1 Roberts was by far your worst offensive player of all. Like, he did great stuff rebounding. Like, you loved his effort. Like, you could see there's something there, that this guy had some it from the moment he stepped in the court for you. But also it was a hold your hands up to your face whenever he tries doing offensively. So it's good to remind ourselves, hey, like, these guys didn't. I mean, Jamal Shead, like, Kelvin Sampson loves to tell that story about how Jamal Shead was unplayably bad his true freshman year at U of H and then developed into the best point guard in the country. Does that mean Sedlot's going to become a big man Jamal Shead equivalent, or what J1 Roberts is? Not necessarily, but these guys aren't the finished article, and that's the great thing of this program being such a great development spot.
Yeah. I think even if you were to, and I'm sure hopeful Tugler is going to come back next year, but man, I think even if you lose all 3 of your big men, Chris Sinak, Jacob McFarland, Sedlot, Court coming back, even if you lose everyone on your roster and don't add anybody else via the portal, I think would be still a pretty talented, fun forward group heading into next year. So I think, this program continues to be exciting both in the immediate and long term.
No doubt. So, big road trip coming this weekend to Kansas to take on the current number 12 team in the country, the Kansas Jayhawks, at historic Fog Allen Fieldhouse. Dustin, before I get to the facts and informing our audience about this year's version of Kansas men's basketball, I'm just going to tell you, and I guess tell the listeners, where my head is at on this game. If it's closer than last year, which is to say it'll be at any point in doubt after the first 10 minutes of on-court action, I'll consider that a success. I've just gotten myself into this mental space of not being too stressed about, not being like, well, because there's going to be some things later I talk about. I'm like, well, I actually think we match up pretty well here. I actually think U of H doesn't look terrible against this year's Kansas team. The more I look at this matchup on paper, the more I don't hate it for the Cougars, but I'll let you dive into it, Dustin. How are you feeling about this matchup? What have you seen from the Kansas Jayhawks that is worth mentioning?
Yeah, so I mean, going to Lawrence, Kansas, and Allen Fieldhouse to take on the Jayhawks is never an easy task, and it's not going to be an easy task for Houston on Saturday, and I don't care how good of a season Houston's having. I don't care how down of a season Kansas is having. This is always going to be a game that you are always going to be delighted with. Any margin of victory is good if you can pull it out when you go to one of the absolute toughest places in America to play. And case in point, Houston was clearly a superior team to Kansas on the whole last year and still had to fight and struggle and rally late and fight like hell to lose by 13 and not get completely run out of the gym when they played at Kansas.
13-point game that did not at all reflect how actually competitive it was. Sorry,
No.
No,
and you and I were both there, so we should know. That said, Kansas has clearly not looked like the Big 12 favorite they were picked as of late. They've looked pretty vulnerable at home this year, and starting forward KJ Adams separated his shoulder in the Iowa State loss and will reportedly miss the U of H game. And very much to the contrary of last year, when basically nobody on U of H except maybe like Malik Wilson had ever played in Allen Fieldhouse before. This time around, every key contributor you got has played here before and knows what to expect a little bit going into that venue. So not an easy game by any stretch, but it's certainly a winnable one. And, as much as I kind of resented Kansas getting picked ahead of U of H in the Big 12 preseason poll after we, won the conference by 2 games last year, returned 4 starters, you could kind of see why it happened, right? They got 11th year seniors, Hunter Dickinson, DeJuan Harris, and KJ Adams back for one more go. They brought in a bunch of transfers, including Zeke Mayo from South Dakota State, who Houston was reportedly after, and I was really hoping we'd get. They got Rylan Griffin from Alabama, AJ Storr from Wisconsin. They brought in a couple of highly rated recruits like they do every year, headlined by five-star forward Flory Badunga. And then they opened the season by making all those predictions look really good. They beat UNC and Michigan State. They beat a Duke team that is in competition for best team in the country, all part of a 7-0 start for the Jayhawks. But they've gone, they just won moments ago, so they've gone just 7-4 in their 11 games since then. However, they had back-to-back losses to good, not great Creighton and Mizzou teams by a combined margin of 22 points in non-conference play. Opened up Big 12 play by losing to a feisty but undermanned West Virginia team at home for the first time ever. Couple games ago, lost at Iowa State. No shame losing at Iowa State. One of, if not the toughest tasks in the country to go into Hilton Coliseum and play a game right now. But lost by 17 in a matchup of Big 12 title contenders where they very clearly looked second best. And then they followed that up by playing Kansas State at home. One of the easier asks in the Big 12 right now. Playing a team on a 4-game losing streak that included a 13-point loss to Oklahoma State and getting absolutely pantsed by the Cougs. And while Kansas did end up winning that game by 10, it was a 2-possession game with 3 minutes left. That was a much closer game than you should be playing to Kansas State at home right now. Kansas State scored more points per possession against Kansas in that game than they did earlier this year against Mississippi Valley State, Ken Palm's worst Division I team in the country. And I think my biggest thing for me about Kansas heading into this game, which does get me kind of like, and like you said, I think you're playing with house money a little bit. You're a game up on everybody else in the Big 12. It's at Kansas. You can never really expect a win there. But the thing that gets me into like, oh man, I like Houston's chances is that KJ Adams injury that I mentioned earlier. Like Houston, Kansas has a 3-headed big man group with Hunter Dickinson, Adams, and the freshman Badunga. And like Houston, they don't really have another healthy body that I think is really ready to go out and get minutes in the front court after those 3. I think their next best option is AJ Storr playing kind of a small ball 4. And I would kind of describe Storr as a poor man's Terrence Arsenault. Against K-State, they started Badunga along Dickinson for the first time all year, and then kind of just, like I said, used Storr as a small ball 4 whenever one of those 2 guys went down. But they really only have 2 healthy forwards right now, and we've seen all 3 of Juwan Roberts, Javier Francis, and JoJo Tugler show some offensive skills at times this year. There just is going to be times in this game when Houston has 2 true forwards on the court, and Kansas is only going to be able to have 1 of Dickinson or Badunga with, maybe Storr or Rylan Griffin at the 4 there. Houston's got to go down low in those situations. And we've seen Houston the last handful of games playing more inside out than we really have. They've got to, I really think, keep that trend going in this one. Even if both of those guys are out there, Dickinson's a good defender, but he has had his lapses. Badunga, really talented shot blocker, but he's also a freshman who's getting called for over 6.5 fouls per 40 minutes right now. And Storr, I don't think is good enough to guard any of your forwards down low. So if you get any of those guys in foul trouble, I think Kansas is in some deep shit. So really, really hoping to see Houston go inside out in this one, Sam, because I think they definitely have the advantage in the forwards with Kansas not having KJ Adams right now.
Yeah, that's the biggest recent development. The fact that KJ Adams is out for the short-term future with a separated shoulder. Not one of their top scorers, but like you said, very much contributes to that, the depth they have in the front court. It just allows them to do things defensively that they're not going to be able to do without him. I think it lowers their ceiling defensively. Does it turn them into a bad team defensively? No, but I mean, we saw how the K-State game went. Like, that's KJ Adams is a really, really big part of why KU has, on the balance of this current season, been an elite defensive team, and they're not going to have him. I mean, top guy in the scouting report is, of course, going to be Hunter Dickinson. And one of those things I remember vividly about when we went to Fog Allen last year is the Jayhawks did a really good job getting Dickinson involved early, and how them getting him involved early and him making some good shots opened things up for them getting better looks on the perimeter and that eventual offensive blitz that U of H was never really able to recover from. And I think one of the big things, if you want to look at the difference between last year's KU team and this year's, is it's a deeper team. Is it the deepest team you'll see this season? No, but last year it was a pretty good starting five and then just absolutely fucking nothing from their bench. And that's not the case. Like, you have AJ Storr, you have guys who can give you something off the bench, but not having KJ Adams, I think, is going to be a big handicap. Is it a handicap that they can't possibly recover from? No. I mean, it's KU at Fog Allen. They don't lose there very often for a reason, but I think you're coming there as opposed to where you were a little under 12 months ago with a much more skilled group of big men. And the thing that really stuck out to me, Dustin, and I actually thought you might bring this up before I did, KU is dead last in Division I at getting to the free throw line.
Yep.
Not that I don't expect them to get some friendly whistles or some calls that make one or both of us pretty annoyed in the friendly confines of Fog Allen, but when I think of the general profile of a team that scares me, it's threefold, Dustin. Not exclusively these three, but I think these are the three biggest things. Opponents who have a high level go-to big men, which KU does have in Hunter Dickinson, but also an opponent that likes to play the game at a really frenetic pace, which does not describe KU. They're 252nd in the country in tempo, at least we're coming into this game. And the most important thing, the thing I just alluded to, an opponent who likes to draw lots of contact and get to the free throw line. And that is very much not Kansas's game. We'll say, and you said, and I agree, you do need to go inside against this opponent. They're 7th in the country in opponent 2-point field goal percentage. Like, it is easier said than done to get points inside the paint against Kansas for a lot of the individual reasons that you said, because Bill Self, even though they've had kind of a clunker couple seasons by KU's incredibly high standards, is still one of the better coaches out there, one of the better ones to ever do it. So yes, that's what you need to do. Hasn't always been your strength this year, making points inside the arc. And certainly it's not on paper. It's what U of H should be doing. It's also on paper one of the worst mismatches, because U of H is well outside the top 200 in 2-point field goal percentage and KU's top 10. Still agree. That's what you need to do. It's just an easier said than done situation. And you go back to last Saturday. I mean, we watched U of H's guards struggle to make shots against an iffy UCF team, at least iffy defensively. Can you be wildly optimistic about doing this against an opponent who's top 20 nationally in both opponent 2-point and 3-point field goal percentage, like the Jayhawks are? But I'm excited for the strength on strength matchup of the KU going against this Cougar defense. I'm excited. I don't take this for granted that U of H is going to be playing one of the biggest basketball games of what I'm sure is going to be a pretty loaded Saturday slate. Like, that's cool.
Yeah.
Again, like I said at the top, if this is close later on, I'll be happy. That's my only expectation. I'd love to get the win. I think there are ways you can look at this game and pretty easily see how the Cougars win it, but I just want this one to be close. I just don't want a repeat of last year. I mean, I'll be fine. No one's going to really, I think, change their priors about U of H if you lose at Fog Allen. Most teams do, but I just like a game that I'm actually sweating out because it's close. I mean, I'd love U of H to blow it out, but let's be realistic here.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, like I said, your best case scenario is a game that's competitive late. And I mean, to be clear, I know I sounded probably very optimistic moments ago when talking about Houston's chances. So just to, balance that out a little bit, Kansas, very good team, very dangerous team, very capable of winning this one. Like you said, Hunter Dickinson, someone you have to be very, very ready to face. And even then, he's still going to score points and grab rebounds. Per KenPom, the only better men's college basketball players this season than Hunter Dickinson have been Cooper Flagg and Janai Broom. In the backcourt, you've got Dwan Harris, who's an excellent veteran point guard, and Zeke Mayo, who, like I said, very capable scorer, would have been happy for U of H to recruit. And kind of like you said, defensively, they've been almost as difficult to make a shot against as Houston has this year. And then on top of that, they take care of the ball and they rebound well, so it's going to be hard for Houston to get a bunch of extra possessions like they did tonight against Utah, for example. And like we've said repeatedly, Kansas, one of the great home court advantages, not just in college men's basketball and all of college sports. So tough game, absolutely, yes. But I think it's still an exciting one for me because I think Houston matches up with them well right now with KJ Adams out especially. And because as much as, Houston could really use a signature win like this on their resume, like I said, it still kind of feels like a house money situation. You're the only unbeaten Big 12 team. It's a loss absolutely, is the furthest thing from a bad loss. It's not going to show up on a resume as a mark against you at the end of the year. Whereas, if you win this, it's going to look really at Kansas is going to be a really, really good win. So, it just feels like a very high upside, low downside game, and still a game that I think Houston is going to come in here. And like I said, 4 starters were here last year. Know how bad that game went. That's 4 guys that bet are going to be very highly motivated to come out and have a better showing this time around at Allen Fieldhouse. So, yeah, just won't be there this time around. Kind of wish maybe I had gone this year instead of last year, but very, very much looking forward to this one on Saturday.
I was gonna say, if they win this game, and certainly if they win it like with style points, that you and I have made our last ever road trip to Fog Island. I'm half kidding.
I got to check out some other Big 12 venues before I go back there anyway, so it's okay.
To the believe it or not, there's another Cougar basketball team that played games this week, and it's a 1-2 week, which I can't believe I'm saying this, but 1-2 actually qualifies as good news around these parts when it comes to Cougar women's basketball. And I think we should leave the good news that the one is a pretty good one. Cougar women's basketball had their first Big 12 win before the month of January closed. Not something that I think we took as a given here, but certainly didn't take it as a given that it would come against an opponent like Oklahoma State, who came into last week's matchup against the Cougars as the number 24 team in the country, who as of this current week was still receiving votes in the AP women's basketball top 25 poll. Because last time we talked about the Cougar women's basketball program in this pod, it was immediately after losing at home to Arizona State, one of the few Big 12 games on paper seemed like a decent candidate for a win. And at that point, it was kind of like, well, hope we at least split the games against UCF, because that one was one of your winnable ones, and you didn't really do so great there. And I guess at the risk of having too low expectations, it's a relief to have a little under 2 months left in the season, not be wondering on a semi-weekly basis here whether or not this team is going to go 0 in conference play. So I'll say what I liked from the Oklahoma State win, besides obviously the fact that Cougars be a top 25 opponent. Great overall game from Kiara Merchant, who for me has been consistently one of the bright spots in an otherwise tough season. She had a game high 20 points on 8 of 14 from the field, team high 4 steals. Right to this point, Merchant doesn't have the same volume output as a lot of her teammates, but I think has been by far your most efficient scorer. And I'm confident saying that when it's all said and done, she'll finish the current season as U of H's best all-around offensive player. The team also continues to shoot well from the charity stripe, shot a better percentage there than OSU for this game. One of the cruel ironies of this season is that it's probably Ron Huey's best free throw shooting team since he's been head coach of the Cougs. Unfortunately, hasn't done much well offensive outside that with inconsistency, but shot a better percentage in the fourth quarter from the charity stripe than OSU, a quarter where not much went right, but allowed you in a fine margin situation to win. Also wanted to shout out Gigi Cook along the same lines for going 10 of 11, from the charity stripe for the game. Bad as the fourth quarter went, and believe me, I will cover how badly the fourth quarter went. OSU coming into this game had only lost twice all year, and you were up 11 on them at the half and 20 after the third quarter. I certainly would have preferred the last quarter to have been a bit less dramatic, but I'm also not going to come on here and solely focus on the fact that you had to cling on to a 79-76 win and ignore the fact that for 3 quarters, you either dramatically outplayed a top 25 opponent or, in the case of the first quarter, played them to a draw. And we've seen this in flashes from the Cougs. That's what's so frustrating, because they were tied after 3 quarters against K-State. You were leading a decent amount of the second quarter against Texas Tech. This team has had its moments of confidence, but that's the problem. It's been moments. It hasn't been anything close to being sustained over 4 quarters, but I will let my overarching thought about last week's win over Oklahoma State be that I'm really proud of these young women for finding a way to beat a tough opponent. Dustin, since I know you watched the finish of this one like I did, I will let you be the bad cop here and talk about how the Cougars almost gave away a 20-point win, or anything else you want to talk about from this game.
Yeah, I mean, I will, like I said, I'll get to that. I definitely, like you said, I also want to start though by saying, hey, it was a great win. Watched the second half of it, was cheering like crazy for the Cougs, was very happy for the young women on the team, was very happy for Ron Huey and the coaching staff. I think it really shows that as many things as are going wrong this year for Houston, effort isn't one of them. This program isn't struggling because these ladies aren't trying or don't care. Doubt. And when you keep grinding, good things happen. So like I said, I'm very happy for them that they got this win. And the weird thing for me was they didn't even do it by turning OSU over a ton or anything. I mean, they kind of did, but turnovers were 22 all. OSU was actually plus 10 in fast break points in this one. Houston consistently got points in the half court in this one, made over half their shots. Just Houston's biggest weakness became a strength for a night all of a sudden, and it ended up resulting in a huge upset victory. Big ups, these like Kiara Merchant, 20 points, Gigi Cook, 16. Yeah, man, it is, though. It's hard to not be like, oh, and also Houston was up by 20 with under 5 minutes to go. Just absolutely was giving it away with both hands over the last 5 minutes as fast as they could, including a turnover in the closing seconds that gave OSU a look at a game-tying three-pointer at the buzzer, just wide open three-pointer at the buzzer. Would have sent this game to overtime. I think you could have comfortably bet OSU probably would have pulled this one out if it had gone to overtime. Fortunately, did not make that three at the buzzer, so the Cougars got the victory. But man, that was, I think, indicative of the fact that, Ron Huey teams, I think Ron Huey has just failed to ever build a culture of tenacity and mental toughness and the wherewithal to win big games at an acceptable level of frequency. I mean, like I said, they pulled this one out. So, I don't want to be too negative, but, I had someone on Blue Sky asking after the game, well, does this change anyone's opinion of Huey or whatever? I mean, and it doesn't, because you saw the negative of the final 5 minutes where they just absolutely were trying their best to give that one away, but also because, I don't know, Houston could have won this game by 50. It wouldn't have changed my mind about Ron Huey. It's year 11. We're about to miss the NCAA tournament for the 11th time in 11 seasons. It was a great game, great win, very happy with it, but no single data point is saving Ron Huey's job at this point. A longtime supporter and friend of the pod, Sean, made a great comp on Blue Sky after the game, comparing it to Cougar softball opening Big 12 play with that phenomenal win over the Longhorns last year. And, we didn't yet know about the dozens of allegations of mistreatment against head coach Kristen Best at that point. So I was able to enjoy the hell out of that win when, when Houston beat the Longhorns to open up Big 12 play. It was a great win, just like this one was. My immediate thought was actually to go way further back compared to the James Dickey Cougs beating eventual national champion UConn Huskies that one year. Another great win that I enjoyed immensely. But you know what all three of those wins, the women's basketball win, the softball win, the men's basketball win, had in common? Did not remotely change the overall trajectory of the program under the head coach in question, who needs to be removed from their job post haste. So there it is. That is me being bad cop. Even in the win, you saw this team just trying to give it away, and kind of, I think, a lack of mental toughness that has just been unfortunately too much of a hallmark of Ron Huey teams. And at the end, it was a great win, but it can't be anything more than a single data point and an overall downward trajectory, as evidenced by the two games that they played right after this one.
Yeah, we'll be pretty quick in this. You were also in action on Saturday at number 25 Baylor, and earlier this afternoon, the first half of the basketball doubleheader facing Texas Tech for the second time in conference play. Not really much notable from the Baylor game, which the Cougars lost 70-51. The only thing I'll say is it didn't follow the usual U of H pattern of one disastrous quarter. Instead, this was just Baylor kind of gradually outplaying you over each of the four quarters. The Tech game was very close and back and forth early. U of H actually led 13-10 at the end of the first quarter. Then the Lady Raiders went on an 18-2 run. Though I guess run might be the wrong word for it. We'll say brisk walk. And outscored the Cougars 18-4 over the second quarter. And the Cougars didn't get their second made field goal until 30 seconds to halftime on a Layla Blair layup. It was complete no-show offensively, and that was basically all she wrote. And the Cougars lost this one 62-44, and once again got season swept by Texas Tech, a program that has regularly been one of the handful of worst in the league, but still one of the handful of worst teams in the Big 12, and quite a bit better than you, which is back to original point of, okay, if that's the reality, you probably need to look somewhere else, even if there are some bigger picture causes that I think we've addressed here as to why this is happening. It's not all Ron Huey. I think the biggest mistake anyone at U of H can make in athletics is to think that this is solely a Ron Huey fix. Like, yes, you probably do need a change of leadership. Yes, you also need to ask yourself, like, do we want to win in women's basketball? Do we want to invest what needs to be invested to win women's basketball? And once you actually have the full allotment of Big 12 money to play around with, that's questions for higher paid people than myself to answer. But I think those were two kind of back to earth losses that reminded you of, okay, what this team is probably going to be this year. as much as we enjoyed the nice diversion of, hey, like, again, anytime that we can take it off the table that, hey, is this team going to go winless in conference play? It's great. Very good. As much as like consistently was and am very negative on the direction of soccer right now, I was thrilled when they beat Arizona. I was thrilled. I was like, all right, we don't have to spend the next couple weeks wondering, like, is this team going to go over? Like, it's a low bar to clear, but I'd like to talk about as few teams that go over Big 12 play as possible in this podcast. And woo, are we doing that with Cougar women's basketball?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, a couple of, I think, down-to-earth losses is the best way to describe it. And I felt a little guilty that, it took very little time after the game ended, especially with the way the last 5 minutes went to not that I wasn't enjoying the game, but to be like, I'm enjoying the game, but also thinking about the broader context of the direction of the program. But I think the results of the next two games kind of hammered home, like, oh yeah, you can only take so much away from that one victory when it remains, your only Big 12 win to date. But I mean, I think one of the more, if you're going to add any more Big 12 wins, Sam, I think one of your more winnable ones comes on Saturday when they'll be hosting Kansas, who I don't have a lot of notes for, but I do know was down 21-5 at the end of the first quarter to Utah moments ago. So just 2-5 in Big 12 play. Getting that team like that at home might be one of your better chances the rest of the way.
Yeah, I mean, beat Oklahoma State, but it's kind of like, I'll believe it against a Big 12 program that's not UCF at the exact moment that I see it.
Yeah,
I'm wrong, but yeah, don't know if that one. Well, I mean, it's earlier than the KU game, but I don't know if that being on the same afternoon is, maybe it's doing a favor in that, like, I won't pay attention if we like lose by 15 to Kansas, which I feel like is the most likely outcome, unfortunately. Yeah. But yeah. A couple other Cougar sports that are either about to be in action or were recently in action that we'll hit on pretty quickly here. Cougar tennis was supposed to open the season last Sunday, unfortunately, but I would also say correctly, the previously scheduled season opener against UNT was postponed due to the extreme cold in the Houston area that kind of started overnight. On Sunday, that match has been rescheduled to a week from today, the 29th, next Wednesday. So our new season openers will be this coming Sunday, the 26th, against Portland at 10 a.m. and then at 3 p.m. against UT Arlington. Portland was sub 500 last season, but still a good bit better than U of H was. And I think you could say that about most of the teams that U of H has faced, but like they almost beat San Diego, who's a perennial top 25 program. Dustin.
I was just going to say, I pull up the schedule because I had those two matches in there earlier, and it looks like there's been an update to the schedule and is now just UT Arlington Saturday at noon is the only game that is now on the books for this weekend. So it looks like another last-second tennis scheduling change.
Yeah, I was going to say, I guess flying into Intercontinental or Hobby, wherever Portland, I'm assuming Intercontinental is flying into, is it's probably going to be a S show for the foreseeable future. So thank you for bringing that up. UT Arlington, your new home opener. That's what I get for not checking UofHCougars.com within a few hours of the show. UT has beat the Cougars last year, pretty consistently solid, but not spectacular mid-major program. Beat you 4-1 last February, like I alluded to. Just scanning last year's box score in their current roster, it's a largely different group than the one the Cougars faced last time, outside of Ana Paula Jimenez, who was a previous all-conference selection, actually in the fall WAC individual championship, lost to an opponent from Tarleton State in the women's finals. If I had to guess, Jimenez will be facing Santa Strombaja on court one. So I think a good opening opponent. I think one the Cougars in their current form should beat, but also one that's, I think, quality enough that when it's all said and done, if you do manage to get a decisive win, it's a good data point that tells you, hey, this team is a decent bit better than the one before. And I will certainly be excited to see the Cougars finally get their season started on Saturday afternoon, not Sunday.
Yeah, you mentioned not only did UT Arlington beat you last year, Houston is now 0-4 all time against UT Arlington, according to the schedule page on the official site there. So I think that maybe tells you this is a match that, UT Arlington is not world beaters. I think at least part of that has to do with Houston not having had the most successful tennis program over time. But I think it does tell you that UT Arlington, not any slouches, and a match that if Kat Adamovich is able to get a victory in her first Cougar match as head coach, would be certainly one with some meaning to it, even if it's not the biggest win in the world.
Yeah, no doubt. I think when I looked at the non-conference schedule, that's why I liked is that there were a lot of winnable ones, but there also weren't a lot of ones where I'm like, you scheduled one of the worst Division I programs. And frankly, coming off the season U of H did, I don't even think I would have been too mad if you threw a couple of them in there. But I think the Cougars are going to get some good tests, not Big 12 level opponents, but enough that you're not going to go to Big 12 play woefully underprepared for a slightly better opponent. You get to kind of ease into the season, if you will.
Yeah.
Cougar Swimming and Diving was also in action last Friday against the Miami Hurricanes, a recent top 25 program. I think they're receiving votes, at least as of this dual meet, went about how I expected, a 194-104 win by the homestanding Hurricanes. Big standout performances worth mentioning. A couple of the athletes who I think we've mentioned a bunch on this program historically, you and I, Dustin, going back to previous years covering the swimming and diving program. Junior Virag Peter and senior Henrietta Fongli took first and second respectively in the 200-yard backstroke. Also shouting out freshman Mariana Cote, who Bobby and I both independently name-checked the last time we talked about Cougar Swimming and Diving. She finished second in the 1,000 freestyle, swam her fastest time in that event. In the current season, we'll also shout out one more freshman, Lottie Cullen, who was second in the 100 backstroke. Kind of in the same way that you expected the dual meet the last time this team competed before this one with Kansas to be a decisive win. This one looked like it was always going to be pretty challenging, and I think after this, the athletes and coaches can truly see how they stack up against what should be one of the best 25 programs in the country when it's all said and done.
I see a slightly larger margin of defeat than you had when you faced Miami in a dual meet last year, but that also you were at home last year, whereas this one shifted to Miami. I know especially in a lot of these like early season dual meets, you'll just see, home teams maybe run up a score a little bit by just having, hey, all your athletes are right here, whereas maybe Houston doesn't fly every single swimmer on the team out to Miami for a meet like this. So I think seeing the match go a little bit further against you was probably in line with what you expected, and tells you that Houston's going to have I think a similarly competitive team to the one they had last year, which is, a good team, but they're just maybe not quite at that Miami level yet.
No doubt. Cougars will be back in action in 2 Fridays at home, their final dual meet of the season before the Big 12 Conference meet next month. They'll be hosting Rice on campus. So that's it for us. Hope you've enjoyed this Bobby-less Scott and Holland podcast, this post-snowpocalypse Scott and Holland podcast. If you want to reach out to us, shpodcast@gmail.com. We're shpodcast on, not really active, but we're still technically on the site that will always know as Twitter, more active and certainly a more preferable social media destination, podcast.beastguide.social. If you don't already, please also consider supporting us at patreon.com/shpodcast to support the work we do and get you some bonus premium podcasts. So that's it. We appreciate those of you that listened to an hour plus of Dustin and I running it back and yammering about Houston Cougar sports. And little role reversal, buddy, what do we always say at the end here?
Go Cougs.
All right. Go Cougs. Let's go.